Here from Vanderbilt University. He is currently finishing up his PhD in Language, Literacy, and Culture with expected graduation in May. He also has studied and has a postgraduate certification in education from Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand. Yeah. And also, also a Master of Education at DePaul University in English Education. Woo! His research and teaching interests are differentiated instruction, bilingual and multimodal literacy, technology and literacy, there's another one. He has middle school and high school teaching experience. He has written 2 co-authored publications, Multiple Languages, A Critical Multicultural Perspective on Local Language Policy in 2 middle schools, and that's in Middle Grades Research Journal. And another publication, IES Methods, Practice Guide on Representing Education Intervention Effects through the U.S. Department of Education. He also has 3 publications, 2 currently revised, resubmit, and another one under review. And I'll let you introduce your talk for today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Erica. I think that's the first time I've ever had any shouting. That's terrific. I'm really excited about that. So thanks for bringing me here, and thanks for just listening and coming. I really appreciate it. My goal for the day is twofold. One, to give you hopefully a deeper idea of what differentiated instruction is, and secondly, to give you some sample of the kind of research that I've done, so you can get a sense of me and what I'm thinking about and how I'm thinking about it. So today I'm going to start with a review of differentiated instruction to try to contextualize the work within the field. And I'm going to discuss 2 empirical studies, both of which were larger kind of collaborative efforts. But the analysis that I present here, it has been initiated by me. So while the data, I think, has been collective and collaborative, the analysis in the literature, a general definition, which I really like, is the planned use of student differences to support learning. And I think that what is appealing to me about this is it's kind of a wide perspective on differentiation, and a more narrow definition, but widely cited, is Tomlinson's definition, which is the recognition and commitment to modify content, process, and product in response to student differences in readiness, interest, and learning profile. Typically, constructs such as language and culture are absent from this definition, and so I think that in the future, I think that's a direction for the way in which research should be conducted around differentiation, and you'll see some of that here. Typically, I'm not going to discuss these theories in particular because they don't in particular guide the research that I'm doing, but people who say we should differentiate discuss Vygotsky, Gardner, and theories of interest or taste, and Bourdieu and Guthrie, people that you might cite in terms of literacy or kind of social perspectives on interest. Why differentiate, I think, is a very important question. Typically, it's argued that we should value diversity, the way that students are different, and that you provide equitable instruction. Secondly, a wide variety of educational organizations suggest it's really important to do this in any setting. And lastly, in regulatory, statutory, and case law, differentiated instruction is being used in a wide variety of ways. So, for example, the Shums versus New York City Department of Education, a teacher was terminated for, among other reasons, it was argued that the teacher wasn't differentiating instruction. Of course, when you read that case, what does differentiated instruction mean is completely unclear. And I think it's often the case when I've probably got 12 or 14 case law examples where teachers have been either terminated, their pay increase has been withheld, or they've been reassigned. And in those cases, it's all, among other things, sometimes it has attendance issues, sometimes they're not stating the objective clearly on the board, but they're also arguing that the teacher isn't differentiating instruction. So I think it's an important thing to think about. And as you can see, because of that, it's embedded in teacher evaluation systems. So Tomlinson writes really carefully and well about differentiated instruction. And she argued in 1995 that there are 2 types of differentiation. One, which he calls micro-differentiation, which typically are ad hoc adjustments that a teacher would make. And by that I mean kind of on the fly. You have a student who finishes earlier. Okay, why don't we have you do some other puzzle or assignment? Or if a student needs additional support, you might be able to provide additional support for them as well. Or you might adjust your questions. What she thinks is really differentiation is what she calls these proactive adjustments. So based on your understanding of the students in your classroom, in thinking about the theory before, about their interests, about what they understand, about how they're reading, that you would make adjustments ahead of time. So the idea that you could plan a unit or a year in advance is kind of at odds with the idea of differentiated instruction, which is basically a responsive view of instruction. I like to call it the diligent daughter of formative assessment. And by that I mean you're thinking carefully about who are these students in my classroom, and then I can make some instructional decisions. And that would change over time. I have argued in a paper that's under review right now that there are 3 models of differentiation. So by that I mean if you have the vision of differentiated instruction, which it can also be described as a philosophy of kind of education, there's 3 ways in which this takes its shape and form, depending on the article that you're reading. And I think this is part of the problem of why there's a lot of confusion around what is differentiated instruction, because it gets used in all kinds of different ways. The first model I call individualized differentiation, which typically means additional support or challenge. So anyone who has a student or is familiar with an IEP is a great example of individualized differentiation. Another model is group differentiation. This is typically what Caroline Tomlinson writes about in terms of creating different groups. You could imagine literature circles or other kind of groups in your class that would be responsive to, for example, like what is the reading level of particular students. And you could create those, and those groups should be flexible as well, but it's essentially a group model of differentiation. The third type, which is written about widely, but not discussed in I think the typical circles around differentiation, is what I'm calling open-ended differentiation. You might also call this choice differentiation. And so people like Herzog and Van Tassel-Baska at William & Mary sell curriculum, which is essentially differentiated. And by that are these complex open-ended tasks where students have a variety of choices. And they basically argue, because they're making these choices about what they're reading, how they produce their knowledge, and who they work with, or what kind of writing kind of approach they use, they are learning different things. And because they're learning different things, the curriculum is differentiated. So this is a different model, but I think something that school districts are buying and paying a lot of money for. And so I think it's important to bring that into the conversation when people talk about differentiated literacy instruction, or differentiated instruction in general. This is going to be a kind of a brief, kind of high-level review of the literature. Most teachers and students support forms of differentiated instruction. I say most because not all teachers do. There's a lot of researchers who have interviewed students as well, especially students who might be identified as low achieving in any classroom, are actually not in favor of receiving personalized individual support amongst their peers, and some issues of social, it could bring down their social status, and they don't want to receive that one-on-one attention. Most teachers say they are differentiating instruction, but researchers often conclude otherwise. There's a variety of instruments. I've probably identified 6 or 7 different tools that have been used to measure differentiation, and researchers oftentimes conclude that it's not happening, or at least it's not happening as much as it should. There's very little evidence that professional development programs can influence differentiation at scale. I think at scale is an important part of this. I found 8 professional development studies that have been used either at school level or at a district level to try and change differentiation practices, and only one of those out of the 8 has shown any change in differentiation, and that took 3 years to occur. And the last claim, or the last kind of theme, is that there's no evidence that professional development of these 8 studies can influence literacy achievement. So by that, I mean assessments of writing or reading or critical thinking. In all of these studies, there has been no change. At scale, though, I think it's important to recognize it's not voluntary where teachers come and learn about differentiated instruction. Okay, this is what we're going to do in these schools, and they offer professional development long-term, oftentimes with consultative support over 2 or 3 years, but the student achievement gains are not strong. And people who study interventions, I think this is not a shocking result. But in addition, some people have studied differentiation within its organizational context and have argued that principal support for differentiation is important. Teachers need opportunities to plan cooperatively. This isn't something they can do in their room. They can't close the door and differentiate. It's better if they can think and have time to work together. And that you need mentors, coaches, and consultants. And this last one, I think, is increasingly important in the case of high-stakes testing, that school policies and district policies on inclusion, how does the reading specialist operate? Is it push-in or pull-out services? Does the teacher feel responsible for all of the students in their classroom, for meeting the needs of everyone? It's really important, and that influences the kind of differentiation and the type of differentiation provided by teachers. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 2 studies. The first study is called Measures of Academic Progress, which was a program evaluation study. So Measures of Academic Progress is developed by Northwest Evaluation Associates, which probably would be akin to an organization, I think a developing organization like ETS, but not as not as widely used or known about. They're centered in Portland, Oregon. And they have a suite of computer adaptive assessments, which are used in 20% of the districts across the country, but there was no independent evaluation done. So Dave Cordray and Georgine Pion, and in cooperation with the Regional Education Lab, did a program evaluation on this. And so, best that I can tell, it's a private organization. They don't provide information about the costs or the profits or the profit margins. But one Illinois district, in the minutes from their planning meeting, said, and they had 18,000 students. They were spending $160,000. That's in 2010 on it, and it calculates to about $9 per student per year. And Seattle paid $500,000 in 2009 to use this program. And in the state of New Jersey, 25 townships or districts are using this program. So there's a lot of money being spent on this. What is MAP? What does it look like? It essentially involves students taking tests on the computer, and it's a skills-based program. So it kind of, in literacy in specific, it divides literacy into these different skills or categories. And people who are familiar with Harry Potter, I would basically call it like a sorting hat. It sorts them into different groups. Although you're not going to Slytherin, you're just going to go into these different clumps here. You're kind of in the middle, you're at the high end, you're at the low end. And teachers are supposed to use that information to differentiate. The only trick is that it doesn't tell them what to do. It doesn't say you should work on these type of skills or these type of readings with these students. It just kind of sorts them. So the bulk of the heavy lifting is still left on the teacher. It also can include, if you pay for it, because you can buy the suite without this, professional development up to 4 days, that's a typical program, and up to 8 days. I'm sure they would stay there forever, every day, if you had the money to pay for it. The basic logic model of the program is that the assessments and the resources, in tandem with the professional development and the consultative support, would increase differentiated instruction in the classroom, and that in turn would raise student achievement. So this was tested. This logic model was tested in a 2-year cluster randomized field trial. This is with David Cordray and Georgine Pion, and I was worked with. There's a team of people. There's probably about 12 different people who participated in that study. It was in 5 districts, 32 schools, and involved 242 teachers and over 4,000 students. And it's basically an efficacy study. So, which means that the developers were involved, and we solicited districts and schools to be involved. So it's kind of like let's create the optimal conditions for showing that it would work. So that was tested. And the first part of it, does it increase differentiated instructions? In general, we found that it didn't. Differentiation was indexed in 3 different ways. One by observation, Secondly, by teacher logs, which is a really interesting approach, and they were very reliable and consistent, and actually I think what we say is kind of maybe underestimated the amount of differentiation they were providing. But the surveys, if you ask them at the end of the year, did you differentiate? People who were in the MAP condition said, yeah, we did more. But when they set it on a daily basis, they had 12 things to fill out during the year. It was exactly the same. So we think this is really the difference on the survey was an artifact of them telling us what we wanted to hear. So we think it didn't change anything in terms of their differentiated literacy practices. And did it improve reading achievement? On average, there were no differences.